I want to welcome all of you here. Some of you come from great distances, Singapore, Bangalore, Philippines, and some of you have just walked up the hill from the Ville. You're all very, very welcome. We're happy to see you. As you will hear many times, welcome home. This is my very first reunion, so it's a great pleasure to share this experience with you. And I, of course, have already come to love just the physical beauty of this campus, incredible stately trees, the arboretum. I have enjoyed it during blizzards, and now I'm enjoying it during this heat wave. I also have learned a lot about the intellectual intensity and engagement of this place. It's truly a pleasure to watch the students and faculty get so engaged with one another in the classrooms, in the labs, around the lunch table, just out on Parish Beach. It is a very, very special place. So it's been a busy year, as you can imagine. The arrival of a new president is always quite busy. We have gone on a listening tour. I have seen some of you, met some of you. The listening tour went about 40,000 miles, so I traveled about 40,000 miles this year with Stephen Bear, our Vice President for Development and Alumni Affairs. We visited 13 cities in large groups, small groups, one-on-ones. It was a wonderful exposure to our alumni and a beginning of what I hope will be a very deep and prolonged conversation. We also had a major project going on this year, probably the project that took up most of our effort and time and creative energy, which was in the midst of the Great Recession. This institution was affected like every other institution, and we had to adjust our budget by about $8 million. It's not an easy task to come in as a new president and say, oh, by the way, my name is Chopp, and you're about to have your budget chopped. But I have to say, despite all my fears about it, it really was a very powerful and good experience, though a painful and hard one for this community. Early on, I think the whole community, staff, faculty, students, the board, alumni council, discussed our values. We decided early on that we wanted to protect access, so we wanted to protect financial aid. We wanted to avoid laying off people. Many schools, many colleges and universities dealt with the budget crisis by layoffs, and that was not what we wanted to do. We wanted to protect jobs. And of course, we wanted to preserve academic quality. So, countless meetings, many, many models, an incredible conversation in the whole community, and we were able to adjust our budget by $8 million. Now, knowing that you might have questions about this process and about how our investment's doing, I want to take a minute and introduce you to Sue Welsh, our Vice President for Finance and Treasurer, and several Vice Presidents are with us this morning, and they can help answer questions. But I also want to say Sue, Connie Hungerford, and the rest of the President's staff did a magnificent job making this process work and really becoming, I think, an extended process in community building. We had the inauguration several weeks ago. The title of the inauguration was Hope in the Age of Clamor. Many people have asked why Swarthmore would inaugurate its president in the spring instead of the fall. There have been all good jokes about it. One speaker said, wanted to see if we got our money's worth. But I think the more serious reason was that we really were in the midst of adjusting our budget. And I think always in this community, the needs to protect the students and staff and academic quality are always going to come first. And it was actually a very delightful experience for me to have been here 9 or 10 months before the inauguration occurred. Hope in the Age of Clamor included 2 panels. We had a group of our alumni come back and talk about building the common good and the issues and problems we're having right now in this society and the world in terms of civil discourse. The other panel was on sustainability. We also had a wonderful evening event with many of our alumni coming back and performing, piano, dance, theater. If you have the chance, you should go on the web and watch, especially that alumni performance. It was really inspirational. So it's been a busy year. Let me make a few comments about the state of the college and a comment or two about where we go from here, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. First, I just wanted to lift up a few of our remarkable students. There is no way I could lift up each and every student who achieved a great deal of success this year. It would take me probably 3 days to read the names because so many of the students I'd have to talk about in 5 or 6 places. So let me give you just a brief selection. 2 students are the recipients of National Competitive Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowships. These are called SURFs. The fellowships assist promising undergrads so they can conduct research very early on in their college careers. This is more and more a part of education for our students. We aren't just teaching them in the classroom, we're getting them in the labs and in the fields to do actual research. Althea Gaffney, the class of 11, is an honors chemistry major and psychology minor from Granada Hills, California. She received a SURF from the American Chemical Society Division of Organic Chemistry. She's just one of 16 students in this country, all schools, research universities, and colleges in that number to receive one of these fellowships. Another one of our students who just graduated, Matt Thurm, recently had one of his films shown at the Cannes Film Festival. That's pretty outstanding. It's even more incredible in that he just started making films a year ago. So who knows where he'll go. 4 Swarthmore students, David Roja, Camelia Leva, Alexa Fry, and Andres Ferrari, received a Davis Project for a Peace Grant for a project they're doing in Bogota, Colombia. They've established an organization to empower displaced and disadvantaged Colombia youth. And again, the number of students I could cite who've received these kinds of awards and are doing these kinds of projects, very impressive. Our faculty, we can also talk about their amazing year. The most important thing about our faculty is their engagement in teaching and research with our students. But they're also noted scholars, and many of them have achieved awards this year. Professor of History Peter Judson, class of 78, was recently named a recipient of a 210 Guggenheim Fellowship, one of the most important fellowships for a U.S. faculty member. Peter also achieved this year several other fellowships, plus a Civilian Medal of Honor from the government of Austria for one of his works. And the South Asian Council of the Association for Asian Studies has awarded Professor of Religion Steve Hopkins the 2010 Ramanujan Book Prize for the translation of his book, An Ornament of Jewels, Love Poems for the Lord of Gods. And our sports program has had an exceptionally good year this year. I could list its many championships, but let me just list instead several individuals I'd like you to know about. Travis Poland, class of 12, who's a physics major from Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Travis is an above-knee amputee, and he captured first place in the 50-meter freestyle in the 2010 U.S. Paralympic Swimming Nationals. He's about half a point from going to the International Paralympics, so we're hoping he gets that half a point. You might have seen him if you read Sports Illustrated. He was listed as one of the faces in the crowd last month. From our women's swim team, Ann Miller, class of 10, a psychology major from Buffalo, New York, recently was awarded an All-American Honorable Mention. This is her 7th All-American Honorable Mention. She is the most decorated woman swimmer in terms of the All-American honors in Swarthmore's history. So I could go on, but let me shift quickly to talk about our future and then open it up for questions and answers. Next fall, we will begin under the guidance of the Board of Managers, a strategic direction-setting, strategic planning process. We all know that the world is changing rapidly: technology, finances, globalization, the shifts in knowledge itself. And in order to preserve our excellence, to preserve our community, to preserve our quality, we can't stand still. We have to think about how the world is changing. We have to think about our own internal needs, and we must plan to move forward in order to keep our tradition. So next year, we'll begin a process. We want to reach out to our alumni. I hope many of you are on the web. If not, we'll reach you by mail. I'll be out and about. We'll send a lot of ambassadors to talk to our alumni. We want your ideas. What are the major questions? What are the values we shouldn't sacrifice? What do our graduates need to know for the next 50 years? What kind of community opportunities do we need to preserve? What kind of new opportunities do we need to offer? Let me tell you, just suggest to you 4 issues that are on my mind as we begin our planning process. One is the issue of what I call building the common good and civil discourse. I think we're aware that the demographics of this country are changing rapidly and that we live in a very global environment. One of the pressing challenges in the midst of the diversity, the inclusivity, and globalization, how do we come together and create visions for the future? John Dewey once said that democracy is always before us, and that the task of education is ensuring that young men and young women can continue building the future. So one of our challenges is to ask ourselves, how do we teach those skills in higher education? A second challenge is the issue that knowledge itself is becoming transformed. Disciplines are changing. Technology is changing. There's much more collaboration in knowledge. Knowledge is much more about problem solving in addition to the traditional theoretical understanding. How do we keep up as knowledge changes? But how do we remain being the leader in preserving the integrity, the thoroughness, and the rigor of knowledge? A third challenge for us all, and certainly for Swarthmore, is sustainable living. By that, I mean addressing issues of global warming, or global weirding, as Tom Friedman calls it, the tremendous climate changes, pandemic diseases, but also how do we help our students continue the values of our Quaker heritage of simple living, of sustainable living? How do we help them understand their own wellness and how to take care of themselves in a world that's going to have lots of change and lots of stress? And then fourth, the economic structures of higher education. We dealt with the recession, the challenge of the recession, very well. We're very strong. Our incredible investment practices, our great ability to budget and finance, and a sense of responsibility in this community stood us well. But I think the deeper issues have to do with the financial sustainability of colleges such as ours. Can we expect our investments to continue growing? Will students need more aid? How do we pay for this incredible cost of regulation by the federal and state governments? How do we manage the challenges of technology? How do we help our families? Probably all of whom, or almost all of whom, find the cost of higher education so incredibly challenging. In a sense, we have to look now at our business model and ask ourselves how we can adapt and change it in order to preserve our quality. So let me stop there and see what questions, comments, suggestions, ideas you have. What is the current policy of the college of letting in children and grandchildren of alumni? I'm going to repeat the question because I know it's very hard to hear. We do track that. and we take that very seriously. It does not mean that they necessarily get in, but it is certainly a weighted indicator in their admissions file. You know, that's often how knowledge grows, this kind of pollution. And I love all the intensity in the room around Susan Cobb's, the mention of her name. So I hope some of you will tell me that, because I'm going to be an archivist about all these women faculty in the past, so please tell me the stories. Andrew Ward, by the way, is here. His father's a graduate. Andrew is a faculty member in psychology. Andrew, why don't you stand up? So all of you who have questions about psychology specifically, you can ask Andrew. So I've been reading a lot about Frank Adelot and the honors program and why honors was brought to Swarthmore. And it is certainly the case that when honors was brought to Swarthmore, it was a way to address what Adelot and many in that era saw as a kind of creeping mediocrity of education. And there was, in a sense, the honors program. In a sense, the honors program was really created to make sure that the most gifted had challenges as well as all the other students. My sense, and I hope you can talk with the faculty, is that is simply not the reason that honors exist at all anymore. Honors is one track among many. It's for students who want to kind of self-design, who want a particular environment, probably extremely good for those going on to get their PhDs for teaching. Honors seminars are open to all students. I think the faculty members have control over who gets in their honors seminar. Many disciplines are struggling with the fact that some students in course get more research opportunities than the students in honors. And in a day when research is teaching the fundamental skills of complex problem solving, our faculty are not thinking about getting rid of honors. Don't worry about that. But they're thinking about, you know, how do we allow everyone to have these opportunities? So I don't think there's any sense of pollution at all. I think what we now have is understanding that students go through education in different ways, and they learn best in different environments. And Andrew's shaking his head yes, so that's okay. The question is from someone who just moved to Washington, D.C. to Indianapolis. Kids, faculty, do not know, and probably admissions counselors, maybe the most important of all in that group, don't know about Swarthmore, and are we concerned about that? Yes, and I think we have been trying for some time. Do I see Jim Bach, our Dean of Admissions, who I should have referred to in the legacy question, is here, and he can talk a lot about our efforts to get the word out. We have redesigned our admission brochures. Jim has a lot of staff, and they travel extensively, but it is very hard. I was delighted when I got here to find out that we have a student from Salina, Kansas, my hometown. Now, that's cool. Allison Stewie. But in my day, there is no way someone could have gotten from Salina to Swarthmore. I just don't think anyone knew about it. So I think this is going to be a challenge, continuing to be a challenge for us. And I think we will continue to expand our efforts, face-to-face travelers who work for Jim, our web efforts, calling upon our alumni to try to be good ambassadors for us. And remember, the challenge is also now global, because we also want to make sure that at least some of our students are from China and India, countries in Africa and Latin America. So any good ideas would be appreciated. I don't sing. I do dance, so I could do that. But yes, I think it's very good. In fact, let me just tell you that one of the funniest commercials on YouTube is from Macalester College, not plugging them at all, but their president is a parent of a Swarthmore student. And there is a very funny YouTube video about the day in the life of a president of a small liberal arts college. So I don't recommend it for what it says about McAllister. But he got, I can't even remember, he sent me an email and told me how many amazing hits. So we are thinking about that. So the question has to do with our loan-free initiative, the initiative we joined a few colleges some years ago, and wondering if it's really a wise thing. If the student, him or herself, doesn't also need to make an investment or a sacrifice. I will say that those same students still have to work, and they have to contribute to their college by contributing some from summer earnings as well as annual earnings. So it's not that our students get a total free ride. We have an expectation that they will contribute an X amount depending upon the student. So I think that is probably going to be a debate going forward as we try to look at our financial aid and ask ourselves how far we can stretch. The power of the loan-free initiative for us, we were already loan-free, or no loan is a better way to say it, no loan for those of lower incomes. Where it has helped us especially is with some of the middle class and lower middle class students who are so stretched. If those students don't get help, they go to the state schools, and they actually make an incredible contribution here. So it is a good question, and I know what you mean. Every student should invest in their education. We hope they do that by their summer earnings and their earnings from work study and other employment. But I think it's also a question of just how much our resources can manage in terms of financial aid. Comments on the role of the Alumni Council. I've enjoyed meeting with the Alumni Council several times. Last time I met with them, I asked them to advise me about how to think about dealing with our students when they march on my office and other things. And they were incredibly helpful about thinking about how to help student agency and accountability. So I think the Alumni Council is an advisory group. We can go to them. I think they, second, are ambassadors. They can help us represent in Indianapolis or in Kansas or in Tokyo, again, the school. They can help reach out to students and to other alumni to let them know what's going on. I think they also serve for us as a way to make sure that we can fact check and reality check with what our alumni are doing. So they can advise just because they're spectacular individuals. They are ambassadors because they represent. And as the Alumni Council go out and represent to the alumni in their communities, they can also bring us that feedback and help extend, in a sense, our ongoing listening tour. So I've been very engaged with the Alumni Council, and I expect I will continue to be. Well, I think that's and thank you. The point is, and it's a good point, and I should have mentioned this myself, so I'm really glad you spoke up, is that the other thing that the no loan policy does, and one of the reasons that schools like Swarthmore wanted to do it, is that students are graduating with such debt these days. And if you make them take on extensive debt in the undergraduate, and then they go on to graduate school, they're going to have to choose their profession in order to pay that debt. And that is going to hurt us in terms of teachers, nonprofit workers, et cetera. So thank you. That really is an important point. So the first question is, what were students marching on my office for? That was kind of a metaphor. Actually, no one really marched on my office at all this year. I'm waiting. I know it will happen. I know. I was kind of disappointed. They did, well, yeah, as many of you know, I was president at Colgate University, and they did it once at Colgate. And I can assure you they probably won't do it here. We shut down a fraternity for really a series of bad incidences. And they marched on my office to take back their fraternity. It was really great. And then they cleaned up the whole building, so that was very nice. So the student issues this year, a lot of student activism around sustainability. Going to Washington, D.C. to march and to visit senators, thinking about building a chicken coop. That was Stu Haynes, the Vice President of Facilities, and my favorite, I think. We ended up not building the chicken coop, but it was about teaching people to live close to their food and to understand their food. Lots of interest in the good food movement, composting, a lot of good political and communal activism around sustainability. A lot of students are very invested and involved in immigration reform. We had a group of students that got involved in the DREAM Act this year and asked me to sign it, which I did. The DREAM Act basically says that undocumented students ought to be able to take out federal loans and have support if they've been here more than 5 years. So lots of interest in that concern. Resistance to casinos. We had a student and some students in a faculty meeting engage, a faculty member engage in some civic disobedience. We also have things like War News Radio, which I hope you all know about, which is a phenomenal form of kind of journalistic activism that does stories on Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think that's a full range. Jim, Sue, anybody? Labor issues, yes, labor issues. Perennial, yes. What do they get expelled for? Sorry. Expelled or suspended for academic violations. Because not... What does that mean? That means because maybe they have that they have continuing problems in classes where they're just not able to do the work. And we provide lots of academic support, but sometimes you just have to make the decision that the student needs to go off for a year and get help or rest or get ready for college. We do suspend students sometimes we put them on a medical leave. It's a type of suspension, but again, because they're having psychological or physical issues that they really can't do the class. And I don't think we had any disciplinary expulsions this year. Our students, though they do pull pranks and occasionally get in a bit of trouble, work hard enough that I don't think we see quite the extremes that some of the other schools do. That's not saying we're not capable of expelling someone, but I think we're fortunate that we don't very often find the need to do so. Swarthmore has maintained a very long commitment, partnership with Chester, and many of our students and faculty and staff are engaged. And Maurice Eldridge, who's sitting right behind you, who's Vice President for everything and community relations, works extensively in Chester. Maurice, do you want to say a few things about how we're involved in Chester?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. With the evolution of the Lang Center, a lot of the efforts in Chester have come under that umbrella, and it involves both faculty and students. Faculty who want to extend the work of their classrooms into community activism and create the opportunity for that laboratory experience and reflection back in the classroom. So there's a lot coming from that direction. There's always been student programs. There's a program called Dare to Soar, for example, which is a tutorial program run out of the Black Cultural Center in Chester using student volunteers and connected to the Educational Studies program. The Chester Children's Chorus, which was founded 16 years ago by John Alston, whom some of you will do Mozart requiem today. John created the Chester Children's Chorus, and that has led to our interest in creating a School of the Arts in Chester in partnership with the school district, not as a charter school, but as an organization that puts money back into the school district rather than taking more money out of it. Some of you who know me might imagine that I've been involved with that one myself because of my interest in arts education and its power to affect change in students' lives. So there continue to be, across the range of possibilities, say because it's unique. Swarthmore and 5 other schools, colleges in this region have joined together in something called the Chester Higher Education Council to see how they can collectively be effective there without crossing wires or duplicating effort. And that is unique because besides Swarthmore, it includes Widener, Newman University, a Catholic college, Cheney, a historically black school, Delaware County Community College, and the Brandywine version of Penn State. So those 6 public and private institutions are engaged together and working in Chester, and their big current project is something called the Access Center, College Access Center, which works with students in the whole county, but is located in Chester to help families and students find their way to college. So those are some.
Thank you, Maurice. I hope everyone was able to hear. I'll just give the very brief version. We're very involved, tutoring programs, Chester Children's Choir, art school, and one of the most impressive initiatives I have ever seen of schools coming together, 5 or 6 of us, colleges, universities, Catholic, public, Swarthmore, have formed the Chester Access Center, which right now is working on access of all types of education. It's very exciting to have that kind of cooperative effort of various schools go together and try to support people in Chester getting access to education. So Mr. Ward, father of the faculty member that I introduced to you all, and Mr. Ward is a graduate, just asked about the engineering program, saying it's good that we've been able to maintain it, wishing we had more engineers with a moral and ethical conscience about, say, oil drilling, those things. And pointing out that Northeastern University has a co-op program. You may know this, that the engineers and actually all students at Northeastern are involved in, usually it's a 5-year educational program where they work as well as study. Michael Dukakis, one of our noted graduates, is currently a professor at Northeastern. Have we considered that for engineering? I think it would probably be hard to isolate a group of our students like that, to put them in a 5-year track or a 6-year track and have others. But I think the point of where does engineering go in the future, that question is extremely important to us. If you have time, wander through the engineering building, and you will see how engineering was done in the 50s and the 70s. The building is very outdated in terms of what engineers do now, and we've got to address that. I know Sue Welch is probably saying, money, because it would be very expensive, but it will be an issue for us to think about not simply the facility, but where does engineering go in the future. I am very glad we have an engineering program. As knowledge becomes more complex, and as knowledge is even more problem-centered, to have engineers at the table with our other students and faculty is going to be very important. So I'd love to hear all the ideas you might have for our engineering program, because it is really great. We've had it, and we've been able to keep it. So the question is about globalization and living in a globalized world and how we're helping our students prepare, and also the observation that because of the nature of our academic curriculum and our community and our stress on social responsibility, our students really do have a lot to contribute to justice and democracy around the world. About 45% of our students, do I have that number correct, study abroad. Many of the students do it for a semester. We very much encourage them. What I like about our program is that though they have, in order to get the coursework counted, they have to go to a place the faculty approve, of course, rightly so, but the world is really open to them. Many schools now have 5 or 6 programs, and that's all you can go to, and they kind of take their students and a faculty member and just create the same bubble but put it in London or somewhere. And I like the fact that when our students go out, they really leave the nest. And they have to go to a place with academic rigor, but they live with families in that country and they really explore it. We have a new director in our program. We have a faculty director, but we have a professional director, Pat Martin, and she is working to make sure that when those students come back, they contribute the knowledge gained to other students. It's very easy just to come back, go in your class, and it's a nice individual experience. But our challenge is how do we utilize that knowledge? Many of our disciplines, I think, around the college have transformed themselves via globalization. Let me tell you about my own. I'm a professor of religion, and I think many of you remember when the religion faculty at Swarthmore and all other schools in the U.S. was largely Christian and taught largely Christian topics, maybe a representative from the Jewish faith. Now, religion departments like ours, all around the country, have really transformed themselves around globalization. Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and other religions of the world, and how those religions interact with politics and culture are much more the focus of religion departments. And you could go through the humanities and the social sciences especially and see that kind of transformation. In history, we have faculty teaching Middle Eastern history, Islamic history, Chinese history, occasionally courses in Japanese history, African history, history of various African countries and the continent itself. So the subject matter is transforming. We're sending students out. We're working hard to bring international students to Swarthmore. I think in the entering class we have 10% next year. I'm delighted with that number. We also hope to have more international faculty. We have some. The presence of international students and international faculty on our campus is just a day-to-day experience of globalization. And I hope you'll share with me your ideas and suggestions about how our students can contribute to kind of common good, justice, and democracy. Do I envision increasing the student population, and if so, by how much? That is actually a really complex question. We have grown, as you know, we've grown very slowly. 1% for how many years, Sue? Forever. that may well be the right answer. There is no, I could not imagine supporting growth for growth's sake. I just think that would be a silly idea. But we have grown because we've needed to add new knowledge, because we've needed new disciplines or new specialties in the discipline. And we could not see cutting what we have. We don't want to cut the English department to add neuroscience, etc. So I think our growth, if you study it historically, has been driven around the need to have faculty to teach fields that the students want and the students need. Sometimes they need to get on to get careers or to get to graduate school. My guess is if in this planning exercise growth gets put on the table, it would be around, are there real needs? So growth is a tactic, it's not a value. But as you know, growth is expensive. At various times in the college's history, maybe there was room for a lot of expansion. Maybe the dining hall had empty seats. Maybe the heating plant had extra capacity. We're not at that point now. I think Stu could tell us that we really are pretty much maximizing our physical structure and our infrastructure. So needs, especially in knowledge, versus cost is important. And then the third factor, how I think about it, is what does it do to the community? Because our magic has to do with this beautiful place, but also I think our face-to-face community, the face-to-face relations of faculty and students and students and students. Could we grow some more? Maybe incrementally, slowly. If we need to, we can look at that. But I would not want us to ever consider getting too big. I've been in literally almost all sizes of schools, the University of Chicago, Emory, Yale, and Colgate. And there really is a difference even between Colgate at 2,800 and Swarthmore at 1,450. There's a dramatic difference in the community. I should probably have Sue and Jim and others weigh in. Myself, I don't see it as a direct competition, again, as long as we're in the range. I think Swarthmore and Pomona, outside of the women's colleges right now, are the smallest. But Williams and Amherst are not that much bigger than us. If everybody else zoomed up, it would be an issue. I think the competitive pressures is more the kind of things I've said before. Knowledge. If all of our peers are offering, I'll just keep talking about neuroscience, and we are not, that will be a competitive pressure. Another competitive pressure is U.S. News. I was talking about this to the 50th year class. We all hate U.S. News. Presidents are pledged to hate U.S. News. Although I will say that kid in Indianapolis or Kansas that gets here, they probably get here because of U.S. News. And also the kids in India and China most definitely get here because of U.S. News. But we still hate U.S. News. But we probably wouldn't want to fall down a lot in U.S. News, even as we hate it. You know, we are morally complex creatures. But it's a serious competitive issue around U.S. News because U.S. News, and I won't go into the details, in part is a measure of your endowment per student. And that's really not because they're saying who's got the biggest endowment per student, but it means you can have a good faculty-student ratio, you can have a good graduation rate, et cetera. So our endowment per student now is good, but others have gotten better. But the competitive pressure would be, say, we added a lot of students. Our endowment per student would drop, and our U.S. News would drop. So that's a secondary competitive pressure, but it's relevant. What can I say about spiritual life on campus, both in terms of organized activities and ambiance and feeling? The spiritual life on American campuses is a hot topic. Again, there's a UCLA study sponsored by the College Board, Religion and Spirituality in America, that has studied this now for about 20 years, and it's really interesting. Students are more and more interested in spirituality. For some, it's the religion of their parents, or maybe another religion, or in a sense, a traditional religion. For many, it's spirituality, and they may pick some practices from Buddhism and some practices from Judaism and some practices from Native American religions and combine them. But nonetheless, this is a generation that, as a religion scholar, I would say is seeking meaning at a kind of depth level and a kind of connectedness. So we have numerous religious groups on campus. We have a Protestant minister, a Jewish rabbi, and a Catholic priest who regularly engage with our students. We have other student religious groups that meet either with a faculty member or on their own. I'm trying to inspire our students to get very interested in the Hicksite Quaker tradition. And there's some real interest. Yeah. So, wonderful suggestion. It has to do with providing more kind of academic options when you come back, taught by our alumni. And we would be so well positioned to do that because we have so many alumni who've been faculty or who've had careers where they have such great expertise. And I think it's a really interesting question. A lot of the projections about the future have to do with the fact that everybody's going to engage in much more perpetual learning or lifelong learning. And how can Swarthmore assist its alumni at times like this or other times in the year? So we'll take that suggestion under consideration. And I notice it's 10 o'clock, but I wanted to share something with you as we leave, a kind of a departing, well, since we talked about spirituality, a departing benediction. This morning I met Rebecca Crunland, class of 35. Rebecca is the aunt of Sue McVaugh, who was the mayor, is the mayor in Hamilton, New York, and Sue's a graduate of this place too. So I was thrilled to see Sue and happy to meet Rebecca, who brought me a poem by E.A. Housman that was given as at the end of the last collection commencement week in 1935. So I hope you've all kept your materials. So in all seriousness, it's a lovely poem, and let me read this. Loveliest of trees, the cherry now is hung with blooms along the bough, and stands about the woodland ride, wearing white for Eastertide. Now of my threesome years and 10, 20 will not come again, and take from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more. And since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs are little room, about the woodlands I will go to see the cherry hung with snow. So thank you, Rebecca. I hope you all keep the image of the cherries being heavy with snow as we go enjoy the parade. Thank you.